worry.
All right, we're ready. It's 8:32. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask the subcommittee members and the staff to kind of do a self-introduction. But before we get started on that, just a reminder, masks are required unless you're speaking. Please turn your cell phones off unless obviously you have to have them on for an emergency purpose. And only speak when you're recognized, please, so we can get through the meeting in an orderly basis. We did make a slight change in terms of public comment, and that change is allowing up to 3 minutes per participant, but that's with the caveat that I want to hear new information. That's what this committee is here for. If it's a repeat of past information, please, we don't need to hear it again. We probably have heard a lot of comments. We have heard a lot of comments, and we've gotten a number of letters. So I would appreciate it if you could hold any comments you have to new information. That would be helpful. Let's see, Brad, we passed out the cards, the request cards for speakers, so if anybody else wants to speak, now's the time. And you'll just monitor that, Brad, for people that are online. I appreciate that. One final thing is for people that are here in the room, we'd ask that you please speak up because it is being recorded. I just organize these a little bit. All right. We'll get you. Just give us a minute here. Well, while we're waiting for that, maybe we could skip to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the October minutes. Actually, we probably should wait on that because Susan's not here. Yeah, we can do that. Bob, you want to start?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Introduction.
Oh, introduction.
Yes.
I'm Bob Gettert. I'm the public representative of the policy committee and a member of the subcommittee.
Sue?
I'm Sue Magnus, a representative for the city of Cincinnati.
Nifong Shen, Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office.
Chuck DeYonker, Hamilton County Public Health, Director of Waste Management. Jeff Newby, Hamilton County Engineers.
Hi, Kirsten Jones, Hamilton County Public Health, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator.
I'm Tony DiPuccio with the Policy Committee.
Michelle Boss, Hamilton County Research. Drew Walker, Hamilton County Research.
All right. So we're up. I'm sorry, Sharon, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting you're online.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm Sharon Lutz. I'm a Whitewater Township resident, navigator for Drive in Whitewater Township, and owner of Green Acres Kayak Rental.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go into approval of the October minutes. Susan, I didn't let you know this, but I do have one change, and it's my fault. I'll give this to you. But on page 6, it says that I stated that there is a regulation, but it is not
Sorry,
stated.
say that again.
I'm sorry, page 6. And I'll just give this to you, is that, I'll read it. It says, Mr. DiPuccio stated that there is a regulation, but it is not stated as county. I think that should read that there is a regulation. It is state, and it is not county. If that makes sense to you.
I've got a couple other corrections, if
Sure.
I may.
Just go ahead, Chuck.
Page 5, third paragraph, second to last sentence, gas monitoring plant should be plan, to drop the T.
I'm sorry, the last monitoring what?
Plan, pretty minor. And then on page 9, second paragraph, second sentence, NPDS permit and the arrangement rather than our, should be the arrangement. And then same page, page 9, second to last paragraph, last sentence, you are looking at sediment controls to prevent muddy waters from being discharged. It's more, septic is what is written.
Oh, sediment and
Should be sediment control, yeah. That was it.
All right, thank you, Chuck. Any other changes? Any objections to those changes?
No.
Can I have a motion to approve as modified?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thanks, Sue. Get a second? Bob?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, we're gonna go, and again, this is another change that was in response to a request that the, public comment period be pushed up higher, sooner in the agenda. And we have done that, and we're at that point in our meeting. So I've got a number of cards here, and again, to repeat, you can have up to 3 minutes, but we don't want old information that we already know or has already been provided. And let's see, I'll make sure I got these right. So this is the last call. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 7. Is that it?
And I don't see any online right now, but I'll keep on.
Okay, that's okay. Okay. They're online. You just don't see any comments coming up. Okay. All right. I'm going to go in alphabetical order, and I'll apologize in advance for mispronunciations. Let's see, Marie, and could you please, when you come up, just introduce yourself and who you're affiliated with or who you're representing. If you're representing yourself, that's fine.
No, I am Marie Picocious, and I am on the board of the League of Borders of the Cincinnati area, and we have approved this statement that I'm making today. We believe that the Hamilton County Solid Waste Management District rules covering the maintenance, protection, and use of solid waste facilities are desperately needed. We know that there are some 22 other districts in the state that have their own rules. These were developed with insights gained from these districts. These rules are authorized by the Hamilton County Solid Waste Management Plan, now in place and authorized under the Ohio Revised Code. Just a little bit of summary of the rules that we thought we have seen of the rules that have been distributed without any changes, which we realize may come today. The attached rules require any entity seeking to construct, enlarge, or modify any solid waste transfer, disposal, recycling, or resource recovery facility within the Hamilton County Solid Waste Management District, to submit an improvement plan and a compliance report to the board for its approval before any action is begun. The approval process includes public notice, opportunity for public comment, a public hearing, and recommendations of the policy committee. Rules for details of the public comment and hearing process are included, and the improvement plan must set forth the proposed project specifications and must comply with the current solid waste management plan of the Hamilton County Solid Waste District. The compliance report must allow the board to determine that the proposed project does not compete with or inhibit the financing or operation of existing solid waste programs or facilities, avoid or mitigate adverse socioeconomic, environmental, and health effects, and is consistent with the OEPA siting strategy. The compliance report must also analyze the impacts, including 24 listed items of concern, such as proximity to any aquifer, traffic impacts, odors, noise, plus projected consumption of energy, compatibility with land use ordinances and zoning resolutions, demands on the community service capacity. In addition, the rules require access and supervision by a county sanitary engineer, simultaneous submissions to the Board of Policy Committee of various submissions to OEPA, and permits obtained from OEPA and an annual report detailing the amount and types of solid waste disposed of, stored, or treated at the facility.
Marie, you have about 30 seconds left.
All right, so, in conclusion, that's actually done anyway. But in conclusion, the legal and voters of the Cincinnati area believe that these rules are needed and well drafted, and therefore we recommend a vote of support for, from this, for the rules subcommittee today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a paper copy of that?
I scribbled it out. Can I send it,
I was gonna ask you, if
Yeah.
anybody has their comments written down, if they could just send them over, that way it'll be much easier to do the minutes.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Mara? Tim, I think you know the routine, so I don't think I have to repeat it for you.
Thank you. Tim Merritt here in my capacity as a member of the Board of Directors of Oxbow, Inc. And of course, we reiterate our desire to have rules adopted as quickly as possible. I do have a letter from the President of Oxbow, Inc. supporting the rules as drafted, at least as we've seen them on November 17th, I think was the last version that we've seen. It's all passed out, Dr. Seymour's letter of endorsement of the rules. And I would like to make a few comments myself regarding the specifics. And I will hand to you a copy of my comments regarding the draft rules. And I want to draw your attention to the definition of enlargement or enlarge in the draft rules. I'm concerned that because of the unique situation of the Rumpke landfill, where they have already obtained permission from Ohio EPA to change the boundaries to include all their property, but have not yet applied for a permit to use the entire acreage for placement of waste. That there might be some confusion as to whether, when they do apply for that, whether these rules would require or apply to that submission. So I'm suggesting adding this phrase at the end to make it clear that when the area of waste placement is enlarged, even though the boundary is already enlarged, that would apply, these rules would apply to that circumstance. Similarly, on definition of hunting, trapping, and so on, that it would apply to the consideration of facilities within a half mile. I think that's way too small. There are a number of county parks that are a little further than a half mile, and Oxbow's 1,200-acre reserve is within 5 miles, so we would urge you to consider as large a distance as possible for consideration in evaluating any application. Similarly, on number I, we would like for you to add and their connections to downstream surface waters, because obviously if the nearby streams become polluted from the landfill, that will affect downstream properties as well. And lastly, on page 8, item 2, subparagraph P says that they would consider the proposed project's compatibility with land uses within 1/4 mile in all directions. We think you should also add and along the primary route for trucks to deliver waste to the facility. If the number of vehicles is increased to hundreds per day, ultimately, the diesel exhaust will have an impact on the land uses. And so there might be schools, there might be other facilities that are particularly sensitive along the primary route. And so we suggest that be added. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Caroline?
If you could take one for a picture around, and when you get to yours, let them have it. Oh, give me one. That would help, wouldn't it? You ready, sir?
Hey, can you tell me what your last name is?
My full legal name is Caroline Reichler, okay? I go by Davis, Carrie Davis, because I shorten it up. So, would you like to see my driver's license?
I don't need to see it, we just need to know what your legal name is.
Are we supposed to use our legal names?
I think it's kind of a customary thing that's done. Why would you use another name,
Because
another
it's
non-legal
shorter.
name?
Because it's shorter, and I don't like people to struggle over it, I want you all to take this off my time, I'm not using.
I don't need a further explanation. We'll go by your legal name, that's what we need.
We'll go
Thank
by whatever name I put on
you.
there.
You can call yourself whatever you want.
Yes, and I just call you a few things. Okay, so today what I would like to, I just find this kind of abuse ridiculous. But anyway, today, the key term for the day is concurrent jurisdiction. It appears from the agenda, which does not have any attachment, to an agenda packet, so nobody even has a copy of the rule in the public, unless they specifically ask for it, that we're going to be focusing on the jurisdiction of other entities. I provided you guys with the 2 court cases some months ago, and a quotation from that case states, and this is the judge's opinion, not mine, not Sherry Davis's, a person must obtain permission from numerous levels of government in order to engage in an activity insofar as receiving a permit from one level of government when one of the other levels of government approves the activity. That's from Clarko, the legal decision. I also included in the papers I sent you, or distributed, other citations from that. So the point I'm trying to make when you talk today is let's not waste our time talking about MST's authority, the health department's authority, the zoning board's authority. We have concurrent jurisdiction. The only jurisdiction that has any concern would be the Ohio EPA, and we do not want to transfer onto their property. But the proposed rule doesn't have that criteria in it. So nobody else's rules matter. And we could stretch this out and go and ask every zoning board in Hamilton County to come and tell us about their specific rules. And the fact is, they're irrelevant. We are focusing too much attention on what other people's rules, authorities, and processes are, instead of developing our own within the framework of the law provided, and that has been very clearly identified in those 2 court decisions, how broad it is and what our limits are. So when we listen to everybody, it's interesting, I like to know, but a zoning board and a health department, they can each have a rule on the same thing. You know, maybe you're not allowed to, something about a waterway. And when the health department looks at it, they're looking for specific criteria related to their department. And the zoning board, when they look at it, they're looking at that rule pertaining to their jurisdiction. So we're allowed to replicate laws and rules. We can have the same rules as the health department, even as the EPA, if our criteria and looking at it and our purpose is different. Our purpose is defined in the document I gave you and in the court decision, and as long as our rules are consistent with our plan, which is for the safe and sanitary management of solid waste facilities and to govern the maintenance, protection, and use of solid waste facilities. Those are the only 2 criteria our rules have to meet. Thank you.
All right, next up, Bill Rumpke.
Thank you. I'm Bill Rumpke again. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the committee, or subcommittee. I think public comment, just like industry input, is vital in this process. It's part of the due diligence, and it will help make better rules. As stated in previous meetings, Rumpke is not opposed to rules and regulations that are reasonable, applied equally, and within the bounds of the law. These rules should be sufficiently clear and not subjective in nature. These rules demand more than a simple and quick approval. The committee needs to perform the same due diligence they are asking those impacted by the rules to prove. We need to consider the entirety of the proposed changes in both the immediate and long-lasting costs and impacts each rule will have on Hamilton County's budget and resources. We also need to consider the total impact on the nearly 30 current waste recycling and composting operations within the county, as well as the 2 million residents, 20,000 businesses, and nearly 100 municipalities that rely on these essential services to protect and provide for a certain level of public health today and long into the future. As I mentioned at the November 17th meeting, we do not have an exact timeline on when we will submit the expansion application for our Bond Road landfill to the Ohio EPA. However, as I sent the letter out shortly thereafter, I did confirm we will not be filing before January 1st, 2022. Furthermore, I also committed to and will be happy to provide the commissioners with at least 2 weeks' notice of when we do intend to file. And if I may again clarify the details surrounding the Bond Road landfill, Rumpke already has a significant permitted space at that landfill. The primary reason for the expansion we will pursue is to allow for improvements to the leachate and gas recovery systems. I know last meeting we talked about the roughly 23-acre expansion. Of that 23 acres, only about 8 of it is for waste placement. The remainder is for likely would be used for infrastructure such as access roads and berms, and like I mentioned before, to improve the leachate and gas collection systems. Again, I urge this committee, the policy committee, as well as the commissioners to engage with the industry in this process and to consider the long-term and widespread impacts as any new rules are considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Tepe?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tom Tedden with the law firm of Keating, Youth and Sleekamp. I am here representing Rumpke Cemetery Landfill. Thank you for your time. This isn't the time and place to get into the nuances of legalities and whatnot. Rumpke has been in this community for a very, very long time. It has had a long-standing relationship with the county, and it believes that it has had a good working relationship for decades and decades and decades. That being said, they have asked to be involved in the process from day one, and they have essentially been left out of the process, which is contrary to law. I always tell my kids, when you try to do something quickly, seldom if ever do you do it correctly, and that's what we're seeing here today. We've not yet heard from the attorney that you have hired, and we reserve any comment to what he may advise you, but the proposed rules are, in many instances, contrary to Ohio law. We have statutes that sort of lay out the playbook. It's very clear what you can do, what you can't do, who can do what, and who can't do what. So what we are seeing in these proposed rules is that many aspects of them are just contrary to law. We also ask that you kind of look at this, talk to your counsel. You have access to very competent counsel. There's nothing in Ohio law that allows for a policy subcommittee. Nothing. So Ohio law does say that they can have a technical advisory council. I ask, where is that technical advisory council's involvement in this process? Right? I don't know. I don't think that it's even had any involvement. Under statute, if you do utilize the technical advisory council, it must comprise of a person representing solid waste hauling and disposal industries. That's why Rumpke's asking to be involved in the process. Nothing more than what the law says that it is entitled to, or some other representative from that industry. Also representative, the right of the recycling industry. Where's that person? If you don't slow down and fix it, everything that comes out from this committee is what us lawyers like to say, the fruit of the poisonous tree. Slow down, do it right, involve the right people and the stakeholders for a collaborative process, and I think what will come out of this thing is something that everyone can. No further comments.
Thank you. And you jogged my memory. I'm sorry. Our counsel, our outside counsel on this is on, I think, he's on virtually, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm here.
Alvin, you want to just do a quick, you should have spoken up, maybe you did. I didn't hear you, but I apologize. Could you just give a 1 minute or 2 minute introduction for yourself?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I had some trouble logging in this morning, so I came in about 8:35. But in any event, yes, my name is Alvin Bauer. I'm a partner at Peters, Kalale, and Markakis. I've been working on principally dedicated to solid waste issues and representing solid waste districts and local jurisdictions for 30 years, actually over 30 years now, and have been a longtime participant and secretary of the Organization of Solid Waste Districts of Ohio. And so my involvement in this area is longstanding and extensive. So I guess probably what people might be interested in knowing is relevant to this issue is, rulemaking authority for solid waste districts is something that goes back, even predates solid waste districts, and goes back to the time of the old county garbage and refuse disposal districts under Ohio law. And so issues regarding rules come up from time to time. I've developed rules for a number of districts. They come in different shapes and flavors, tuned to the needs of the specific districts that are involved. And sometimes the rules are developed just as a good housekeeping measure, and sometimes they're developed because of past experience of the district and a conscious effort to kind of to provide some protection from re-experiencing those kinds of problems. But they really have not been the subject of a huge amount of litigation in the past. And probably the most notable exercise was the 10 years of litigation, sorry to say, that came out of the Clark County situation, starting around 1994, ended around 2005, when there was an effort to site a new landfill in that county. And that was a process that I was involved in from start to finish. And so, it's training under fire, because up to that time, really, there had not been a whole lot of litigation, except for, down in Montgomery County, there has been some older litigation, but really nothing that came up in connection with the authority under solid waste management plans, which was a new thing starting in 1989. So I've been through that experience, and then, of course, since then have worked with many districts on their plans, on their rules, on their funding, really everything to do with advising solid waste management districts. And so, I was at one point in time, probably 25 years ago, when I was still at Eastman and Smith, we used to do some work for Hamilton County, but it has been a while. And it was a surprise, but I was a pleasant surprise to get the call from the district here, and I'm truly happy and and honored to be able to help the district with this current exercise. So with that, I don't want to hone in and get in the way of public comments that are going on here, Mr. Chairman. And I suppose we'll be getting back to and talking about the proposed rules probably in a little bit later in the agenda.
All right, very good. Thank you. And again, I apologize for not recognizing you earlier. Let's go back into the public comment period. Sandy?
Make a file to send it to I can.
We can get together with you after your comment.
Okay, my real name is Sandra Stalin, but usually people screw it up, so I just go by Sandy.
That's fine.
I represent myself and several other families that live on either side of my property that's on Martinsburg Road. I think it is quite amazing that Rumpke has been able to convince the EPA that they can somehow suspend the principles of physics
and this is gravity, and put a dump on a hillside. The past history has shown that they have been fraught with landslides on flat soil. My property on Lawrenceburg is 3 doors down from Bond Road. It sits across the river from an asphalt and gravel plant. It's 1 mile upstream from another gravel plant. It's 3 miles north of a Duke power plant, and of course 12 miles away from Fernald. How much more dust, filth, and contamination can you expect to shove into one small area? There are hundreds of acres of flat land in the north of the county. Westchester, Butler County could easily have a dump. This whole area in question is a watershed for the Ohio River tributaries of the Great Miami, which have already been polluted by the Colerain dump, and now the Class A Whitewater River. Why would anyone deliberately pollute a Class A stream in the last few miles before it empties into the Ohio with poisonous leachate that will gravitate down the hill into the river? Why is it that Hamilton County thinks that every filthy industry should be stuck on the west side? It's been my question my entire life. I was born the year they started refining uranium in Fernald. I live within 6 miles of the plant. I moved as a child because they decided to take my grandfather's entire farm to Dry Fork Road, Interstate 74. I worked at Greater Sea Dental Laboratory, which is on Struble Road, right across the street from the dump, for over a year, and I was unwillingly subjected to the chemicals they unsuccessfully used to mitigate the smells caused by their practices that make them the #1 emitter of methane in the country. They say they only take in residential garbage, but I have worked the season at the Garden Center at Home Depot to know what deadly poisons are sold to residents. Rumpke business practices are environmental nightmares that should no longer be allowed to continue without the strictest controls. It is 2022. You no longer get to use the air, the land, and the waterways as dumps without strict controls. The old adage of the solution to pollution is dilution can no longer hold. The past practices of Rumpke can no longer be tolerated in this area, and you cannot dump on a hillside. Thank you. Right?
Thank you. This will be the last. Lisa?
My name is Lisa Wynn. I'm a member of the Ditch the Dump group. As the last person spoke, she pretty much represents a lot of the feelings from the people from the area. I just want to ask you to adopt the rules due to the community impact by the disposal of waste. Thank you for giving us a voice and it being part of this, speaking of involvement, giving us a chance to be involved. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have, one online.
One online?
All right, Kurt, there you go, you're on.
Thank
Kurt,
you.
I'm going to go ahead and give some comments.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kurt Grossman. I'm a citizen, taxpayer, and voter in Hamilton County in Cincinnati, Ohio. I would be with you there today, but I'm under the weather and I didn't want to take a chance of getting anybody else sick. This has not been a fun experience. A few comments to limit to. First, at the last policy committee meeting, I handed out a proposed rule. I did that because I was unaware that there had been other rules proposed, which is part of the problem with how this process is working. You're asking for public comment before the public even knows what you're going to discuss. I would ask that what I gave in, and in fact, it was used by somebody to say, well, see, we have too many rules to consider. We can't do this. That was not its intent. It was there to be as an intent to say, I didn't know we had any being proposed. I would ask that mine not be formally considered, but rather that it just be used as a checklist to make sure whatever rules you come up with address the various items listed there. So we can take one of them off the table as a challenge. Second, Mr. Rumpke made the statement that the additional acreage is primarily for leachate handling, and yet then went on to point out that nearly 25% of that is for actual solid waste handling. So it's not just primarily leachate, and we have to be very careful and watchful of what people say versus what they mean. Third, there was a statement made by the attorney for Rumpke that I believe that He said there is no representative of the industry on this panel. I believe that is incorrect. I believe there is in fact a representative of the industry. At least to me, looking at the screen, is the gentleman in the bottom left. I think red hair. I'm not sure if I were standing at the podium, I would think he'd be at the top right. I also believe there is another member of the industry that might be sitting immediately to the left of that podium. I'm not sure of all the players because I'm relatively new at this. I've only been at one meeting to get to start to know people, and seeing them by masked faces is very hard without seeing the full face. But those were the points I want to make. I think it's important that the process for public input be changed just to try and help people. No good deed goes unpunished. You're trying to do it up front to accommodate people. And yet you're getting comments at a time when people don't necessarily even know what it is you're going to be talking about, other than an agenda topic. Under Robert's Rules of Orders and the way the county and the city have run, public comment should be taken on each item on the agenda, not an overall 2 or 3 minute limit addressing the entire agenda without even knowing the specifics. I do believe that the rules that were submitted from this committee last time were taken from another jurisdiction in this state that had rules and therefore have been tested and time tested, and should be the framework for putting together formal rules. Clearly, we can take into account the needs of the industry, but also need to take into account the needs of our community, because right now there's nothing that would stop anybody from building a landfill in Indian Hill and Fountain Square, short of only acquiring the property. And we know that can be done by many people. So thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Hope you feel better. And with that, we can wrap up the public comment period. Michelle, we have a presentation by Ohio EPA Southwest District Office. Are they on the line?
Yes, Michael
Okay.
Harris.
Yes, I'm here. And
Thank
let me see
you
if-
for taking the time to join us today, Michael. Greatly appreciate it. I don't know how much background you've been provided, but I think you've probably caught the gist of that. The Hamilton County District is considering implementation of some rules, and this subcommittee was formed to start that process. And questions have arisen along the way as to obviously what Ohio EPA's role is in the entire permitting process, and we're hoping you can give us an oversight on that today.
Yeah, that's what I'll try to do here. Let me see if I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. Hold on.
Okay.
Someone just chimed in right now. Gary Hammerley?
It's Gary Hammerly. Hammer with an F.
Thank you, Gary. Could you just indicate who you're representing, and we are going to cut off the public comment after your presentation.
Yes, I am representing myself and my family and my concerned neighbors. So just a little background with me. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, grew up in the West Side, lived there for 25 years. Got married, moved to Coleraine, lived there for 3 years. Typical hardcore West Sider. We went a little further west. Life brought us actually into Indiana. So we moved to Indiana about 17 years ago. We are currently neighbors to the proposed landfill. So we are bordering the Ohio-Indiana line. It doesn't get much closer than that. When we grew up, I grew up in a neighborhood where we kind of looked after one another, took care of our neighbors. We're always kind and courteous, and just kind of looked after them. We moved to Indiana. Things did not change at all. Unfortunately, we did not have really close neighbors. We live in an area where it is pretty remote. My concerns are a lot with this allowing to go in. Noise pollution, odor pollution, as well as air pollution, which leads me to my point. What is being dumped there or permitted to dump, and where that is actually going is the dust generated by the trucks and traffic disturb and introduce particles into the air that are going to affect me and my family by getting into my drinking water. We live in an area where we are on cistern water, so we have no opportunity for clean drinking water as far as city water goes. And at this point, we do not want to drill a well with this project going in. But obviously, if you drive by 275 in Coleraine, known as Mount Rumpke, you can smell that for miles. So you know that's whatever's getting in the air is getting in the air. And what can be done, or where are you going to allow this to go, and how close are people going to be that live there? I would ask you to highly consider this and prevent this from happening. It's just detrimental to the community as well as my family. We have always been kind and courteous to our neighbors and ask that you guys do the same, even though there is a state line that divides us. Just because there's an imaginary line on paper doesn't mean you guys aren't my neighbors. And I ask the board and committee to really think hard and consider everybody's input and limit what can go in there and where it goes.
Thank you, Gary. If you would also like to submit something in writing, you can email that to Michelle Balks here at Hamilton County Solid Waste District as well.
I will do, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Michael, would you like to start your presentation?
Yeah. Let me see if I can't get everything pulled up here. And let's see here. Go ahead and turn on my camera so everybody can see me while I'm speaking. Let's do this one. This up in PowerPoint. There we go. I assume everybody can see my PowerPoint presentation here.
Yep, it's clear on the screen.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Michael Harris with Ohio EPA's Division of Materials and Waste Management, and I'm here to talk this morning about Ohio EPA's permitting process for solid waste facilities. So, to protect human health, or Ohio EPA's primary goal is to protect human health and the environment by ensuring the quality of the state's land, air, and water. And the process of reviewing a permit application assists us in meeting that goal. So the Division of Materials and Waste Management reviews permit applications for landfills, transfer facilities, solid waste incinerators, compost facilities, and scrap tire facilities. And these types of facilities are regulated under Ohio Administrative Code 3745 with the specific chapters noted here on the slide. The permitting process is similar for each of these facility types, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'll just be focusing on the permitting process for a landfill. So when reviewing a permit application, what can Ohio EPA consider? So permit applications must include the use of best available technology, which is a set of rules written according to Ohio law that limits a facility's location, design, operation, and closure and post-closure standards. There's also several aspects to a facility, specifically a landfill, that Ohio EPA does not have the authority to consider, and they include local zoning. So any zoning codes would be enforced by local officials. Also, where the waste is generated, whether that's in-state or out-of-state, truck traffic, property values, noise, and popularity of the sites. And again, those are things that we just can't consider when reviewing a permit. So to ensure communities are informed about proposals for new or existing solid waste facilities in their area, Ohio law requires meetings based on the type of permit and the facility. And we achieve this through an applicant's meeting, a public information session, and a public hearing. At the applicants meeting, this allows the applicant to outline their proposal and respond to questions from the public. And also during this meeting, Ohio EPA will also describe the permitting process. At the public information session, Ohio EPA will outline the proposed application, describe the permitting process again, give an update on the application review, and respond to questions from the public. At the public hearing, this is where the agency will gather formal comments in support or opposition of the permit application. Now, for existing facilities, the public information session and the public hearing may be combined into one meeting. But for new facilities, the public hearing must be held at least 14 days after the public information session. And then both of these meetings will be public noticed by Ohio EPA at least 30 days in advance. For landfill, all three of these meetings are required if the permit application proposes any one of these, including establishing a new facility, increasing the total capacity by more than 10%, expansion of the lateral limits of waste placement, increase in the depth of excavation, or a change in the technique of waste receipt or type of waste received that may endanger human health. Although not required by law, if there is significant public interest, a public information session or public hearing may be conducted for scrap tire facilities, class 2, 3, or 4 composting facilities, or a transfer facility. Now, for the transfer facility, the applicant's meeting is actually required. So there'll be at least one meeting for that one. For the permitting process, here's a general overview of that process for a landfill permit application. Just keep in mind this flow chart is not an absolute, as not all facilities are the same. It's also important to note that the earliest the public information session can occur is after the first notice of deficiency is issued, but it's often scheduled after the review is complete. And then for existing facilities, again, the public information session may be held in conjunction with the public hearing. All right, so let's walk through the permitting process for a landfill. Of course, it all begins when the applicant submits the permit application. Ohio EPA will begin its technical review, which looks into great detail at the application, and we have 90 days to complete this initial technical review. The review will include looking at detailed plan drawings that would show the property lines, facility boundaries, waste handling areas, and leachate management structures, as well as the location of existing domiciles, floodplains, national parks, state nature preserves, and wildlife areas. The narrative reports, when we look at that, we're looking through the contingency plan, quality assurance, quality control plan, and the financial assurance information. And we'll also look at additional criteria such as the background investigation, compliance history, and citing criteria. After the facility submits the permit application, they have 45 days to hold the applicant's meeting. All right, once the technical review is complete, Ohio EPA will send a notice of deficiency letter or an NOD to the applicant. An NOD is just a list of items from the permit application that does not meet rule requirements. So at this point, the applicant would work on addressing the deficiencies. And it's important to note that there is no time deadline for the applicant to meet to get a response back to us. After receiving a response to the NOD, Ohio EPA has 75 days to continue the review of the NOD response and permit application. If more deficiencies are noted, Ohio EPA will send another NOD to the applicant to address. Again, no deadline for them to submit a response. But once we receive the NOD response, the agency gets an additional 75 days to continue its review. And then this process will continue until all the deficiencies have been properly addressed. Once again, for the public information session, at the earliest, it may be held after the first NOD is issued, but again, it's often held after the review is complete. And for existing facilities, it may be combined with the public hearing, and that meeting would be public notice at least 30 days in advance. All right, once all the deficiencies have been addressed, Ohio EPA will send this recommendation to the director, who will either issue a draft action denial or approval. Next, Ohio EPA will hold a public hearing to accept comments in support or opposition of the draft action. Again, at least 30 days prior to this meeting, the agency will public notice that. After the public hearing, Ohio EPA will respond to public comments through a written responsiveness summary. And then finally, at the end of the permitting process, this is where the director will either issue or deny the permit. So that's pretty much the permitting process for Ohio EPA. Here's my contact information in case anybody has any follow-up questions later on they'd like to ask. I don't know if the committee has any questions for me at this time.
We'll go around the subcommittee here. Bob, do you have any specific questions for Michael?
Yeah, I did. On the permitting process, on the public hearing, you noted that EPA had certain authorities. Could you repeat that? It was on one of your slides.
Yes, let me go back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, when we're reviewing the permit application, get my notes back here. Facilities need to be able to use, or the facilities need to use the best available technologies. Again, that's just a set of rules written according to law that would limit the facility's location, design, operation, closure, and post-closure standards.
Okay, I'd just like to.
And that second bullet point, it's,
Right?
I think it was the next slide that I was asking about. That's it right there, that you cannot consider these points, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, these are things that when we review the permits, we get a lot of questions about, but these are things that we cannot consider when we review the permit.
Okay, that answers my question.
Okay.
Sue?
I don't have any questions right now.
I have a couple of questions, Michael. You mentioned best available technology. Has that evolves over time? Is that correct? In terms of what was
yes.
the best available? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's kind of a broad view in terms of what was best available technology, whatever 25 years ago, is not the same as it is today.
Right. I mean, right.
Okay, and two facilities, or type of facilities, I noted that of Ohio EPA, weren't part of your presentation, is maybe a better way of saying it, is any material recovery facilities, and also anaerobic digestion facilities that take in solid waste.
So for like the scrap tire facilities, so this presentation was just to cover like facilities that we would permit. The scrap tire recovery facility, at least like a class 2, that would be a license registration, go through a license registration process, not actually a permit. And then as far as the anaerobic digestion, I would have to double check on that one, because off the top of my head, I don't have that answer for you, but I can follow up with you.
Maybe a better way of, it's a more general question rather than within your specific division. There might be other divisions of Ohio EPA that could possibly regulate that, and that's just a speculation on my part, I guess. And the same thing with any material. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say several of our facilities, may require a permit from a different division within the agency. And I believe the anaerobic digester would be Division of Surface Water that they would be permitted through for that one.
All right. And when you review permits, you involve other divisions of Ohio EPA, air, groundwater, surface water?
Yes, sir. It just depends on the facility and, you know, what it is that they're doing, which division would be involved.
Okay.
I do have a question when you're done.
Go ahead, Sue. I was just looking down my.
Can you tell me what is the process for updating the best available technology?
For updating it, so, I mean, I guess I don't really have a really good answer for you at this moment. I mean, we do have the 10-year review process that we go through, you know, every 10-year for the facilities to make sure that they're up to date with current rules. So, you know, any landfill, you know, whenever the initial permit is issued, like I said, every 10 years after that, they would go through a review process, make sure that they were using the current rules. So I guess that would be our BAT updates. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think I can partly answer that too. It typically starts at the federal level because all the solid waste regulations are really based upon federal regulations. So
Yeah.
the feds are overlook the shoulder of the state agencies that are approved to for basically enforcing the solid waste regulations.
Yeah.
So there's been it depends on how the technology really develops.
Yeah,
So-
that's kind of, I'm interested in kind of how nimble they are when we have new information, you know, like the new information coming out about PFAS, like, and how PFAS is in this concentrated form in the leachate, and how that can be, you know, that could be problematic if leachate is released into tributaries with these type of chemicals. And so what is, you know, based on that new information, how are you guys changing the process for how they clean up their leachate?
Well, I'll interject here. I think that really falls to how the leachate is being managed. If it's being totally treated on site, that's one set. If it's being transported to either a privately owned treatment works or a publicly owned treatment works, a lot of that then depends on where they're discharging to. If they're discharging to surface waters, then it's a different process and technology.
Yeah, and I think it was a combination at MSD. They said last time that, you know, they do a little bit of pre-treatment, then it goes to MSD, or it goes here on the rainy days, or, so I was just wondering if there was any kind of activity based on this new information about trying to clean it up better.
Kind of getting into the weeds on this, but nearly every state has a task force or is looking at PFAS.
Yeah, you know, yeah,
Still
and I'm
very
curious how we compare to other states, yeah. Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Just a general comment on best available technology. It goes through a political process of approval through RCRA amendments. And the last RCRA amendment was a very long time ago. I don't have the dates, but it has to go through congressional approval. And
It is, you're right, Bob, it's a long process.
it's a very long process and a political process.
And,
So not
And there has been technical upgrades that have been proposed on landfill BAT technologies, but they have not been approved through Congress in recent years.
and the same thing on the air side.
Yeah. I would venture to guess at least a dozen years since the last RCRA approval, but I don't have the exact date.
So not nimble.
Yeah, not nimble.
Hey, Michael, was probably really putting you on the spot, but in terms of timeline on this type of a process, and I mean the process I'm talking about is either a new permit application being put in for a new facility or a permit application being put in to modify or expand a facility? What generally do you see in terms of an overall timeline? Or is it generally months, or is it generally in the timeline of years? You ran through a summary there where there's a lot of submit, review, provide a list of deficiencies, resubmit, re-review, another list of deficiencies. I assume that can go on for quite a while. For just knowing the iterations that you can go through on an application.
Yeah, the short answer is the process can easily take at least a year. Yeah, in my presentation, the initial review, we get 90 days to respond. For each response thereafter, we get an additional 75 days to review it. Really, the variable in the whole thing is, the applicant doesn't have a deadline to get a response back to us. So it kind of depends on how long it takes them, the applicant, to respond, and then how many cycles we go through as far as the review, send out another deficiency letter. So
I assume part of that,
easily,
and I'll give an example of what I've seen on some other facilities have to do, particularly with groundwater. Ohio EPA may come back and say, we think you need to do additional characterization on this, or you need to provide additional information on a certain aspect. That could require the applicant to go back out and actually do field work and gather additional information. And so that is not necessarily something that gets turned around in a week or two. It could be if they didn't require field work, but if it requires more extensive field work, then it could, just to get to that point before they even respond back to you, could require months and months. At least that's what I've seen.
yes.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you again, Michael, for joining us today. Greatly appreciated, particularly on given the short notice.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay. Michelle, do we have someone here from?
Brian Snyder is supposed to join us on Zoom.
No, he was trying to squeeze it into his schedule.
Yeah. Brian, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome, Brian.
Hello. So,
Thanks for joining us.
no problem. Go ahead.
So could you give us an overview of, I'll try to characterize it this way, as looking at all of Hamilton County, kind of how is land use and zoning generally managed and implemented within the county?
Sure. And then, I'll
And
end
I'm
up
sorry,
with,
I know that includes 49 jurisdictions or whatever, so.
sure, it's actually easier than it sounds, and I'll end up with Whitewater Township since it's different than the rest.
Okay.
Not sure if everybody can see this now.
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. So just to introduce myself, my name is Brian Snyder. I'm the zoning administrator and development services administrator for Hamilton County. I've been here working in some capacity in zoning and subdivision since the year 2000. This graphic that I have here is the graphic that we use to kind of demonstrate the different zoning jurisdictions in Hamilton County. And I'll go through it briefly. All of the yellow jurisdictions on this map are the cities and villages. Each one of them has their own zoning jurisdiction and building department. Some of them contract through building with the building department here at the county, but all of them have their own zoning codes and their own zoning enforcement. And none of them bring any of that, any aspect of zoning through Hamilton County for review. So we see nothing that happens in the jurisdictions. The townships that are in kind of this orange color are townships that have adopted township trustee zoning. So they've created their own zoning code, and the voters of these townships voted to adopt zoning under township trustee jurisdiction. So anything that happens in Anderson, Delhi, Colerain, Crosby, and any of the other townships in the north part of the county that are shown as orange here, go through the township trustees for review and approval of any zone changes or any kind of zoning approvals. Hamilton County commissioners have a zoning resolution that they adopted. It used to apply to a lot of the townships and now applies to all of Columbia and Harrison townships, most of Greene Township, and most of Miami Township. In these areas, the county commissioners have zoning authority, so they are the ones that approve zone changes. I work for the county commissioners. I administer zoning in these jurisdictions for the county commissioners. And so this is the area that we do most of our zoning work. The kind of light green jurisdictions, the Sims, Woodlawn, and North Bend have adopted local zoning. So North Bend and Woodlawn have their own planning commissions and city council authority. And Sims Township has trustee authority over their own zoning code. These are 3 different zoning codes from the counties. But they have contracted with Hamilton County Planning and Development to administer the zoning codes in these areas. So we do all of the permitting reviews. We attend all of the meetings and write all the reports for those jurisdictions. So those are all the areas that are zoned in the county. Finally, Whitewater Township and the northwest portion of Miami Township that you see shown in gray here have no zoning adopted whatsoever. So there is no land use regulation of any property in Whitewater Township or the northwestern portion of Miami Township. Any use that you can think of can go on any property in any of these jurisdictions. There's no setback requirements, there's no buffering requirements. All of those things are related to zoning authority. And there is no zoning authority in Whitewater Township or Northwest Miami Township because no zoning has ever been adopted by the voters of those jurisdictions. So that's kind of a brief overview. I'm not sure if you need any other descriptions or discussion or whatever, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Subcommittee, Bob?
No questions?
Sue?
No, thank you.
So you said that, I'll try to characterize it this way, is that Hamilton County Planning and Zoning there it is a resource right now for any political subdivision in the county. Is that a fair statement?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
We do offer zoning jurisdictions to those or zoning administration to those jurisdictions that I discussed. We have limited staff. We're currently not actually taking on any other jurisdictions at this point unless they adopt the county code that we are typically administering in other county jurisdictions.
Okay. And zoning is adopted by a specific political subdivision by vote of the voters?
Yes, so somebody has to put together a zoning plan that would have to be voted into effect by the voters of the jurisdiction being zoned.
Okay. And that process, the first step in that process is usually having a land use plan done as well?
Zoning in the state of Ohio is only permitted in accordance with a comprehensive plan, what the state calls a comprehensive plan, but does not define what that is. So there has been case law that suggests that doing a comprehensive zoning plan, just the act of going through the jurisdiction and creating the zoning districts for every property in the jurisdiction is in itself a comprehensive plan. So it's not, you don't necessarily have to do a comprehensive land use plan to adopt zoning, but you do have to do a comprehensive zoning plan, which requires you to review every property in the township or in the jurisdiction.
Do you know of any jurisdictions in Hamilton County that have not first done a land use plan as a basis for their zoning?
Most of the jurisdictions in Hamilton County adopted zoning in the 40s and 50s. There was, I know, a countywide comprehensive plan at that time. I don't know that there was a specific parcel by parcel land use plan that was a part of that when they adopted them. And then I believe a lot of the other jurisdictions did some form of comprehensive plan before they adopted zoning. I think the last one to adopt zoning is Harrison Township in the 70s. But again, I'm not positive if they had a comprehensive land use plan before.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian, appreciate that.
No problem.
Sue and Bob, last chance for any questions?
I guess, yeah, one question would be, you think that the reason they have no zoning is because it's intentional, they just really are anti any zoning, or are there financial barriers to putting these plans together that some of these townships just can't get over?
Well, in some of the older files that we have here, which having had zoning since the 40s and 50s, you can understand that we have some very old files. I've looked through some of them. Zoning has been proposed to Whitewater Township and Miami Northwest several times over the years, and they have not, either they've been voted down by the voters of the jurisdiction or they didn't progress. Adopting county zoning in a jurisdiction does not actually require you to spend any money, because as the county, we're required to provide you with the zoning services if you adopt the county code. To do the trustee zoning, it would require you to have things like a zoning administrator or zoning inspector. So you would have to have some staff that you would have to hire to administer your zoning code. Once you have zoning, then you're required to issue permits. So somebody has to review those, and then you have to have a zoning inspector to inspect complaints and make sure people build the stuff that they said they were going to build. Those are required positions by the state of Ohio if you have zoning. You also have to appoint a board of zoning appeals and a zoning commission if you're a township. So you have to have several volunteers that would, work on the boards and commissions that you're required to create if you adopt zoning in Ohio. So that's the burden for township adopted zoning. There is both some manpower issues and some financial obligations that you have to adopt township zoning. The Hamilton County boards would assume any if either Miami Northwest or Whitewater adopted the Hamilton County zoning code, the Hamilton County boards and commissions would have to would automatically assume authority over those jurisdictions for the things that they're responsible for, just because that the county code requires it, and all those positions have already been filled in the county.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Brian, and thanks for accommodating here on short notice. I know I actually was on the Hamilton County Planning and Zoning Commission many years ago, so I know you guys run a rather lean staff, I guess is the way I would say it. But thanks again for making time available. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. No problem at all.
Okay, we're on to agenda item number 7, and this has to do with discussion of the draft rules. I kind of set this up, so I'd like to hear any comments from the support staff, meaning you, Chuck, or Jeff, if you'd have any comments. So, Michelle. And I'm not even sure you've had time to review them. Well, Chuck is doing that. There was one question I had for Michael, although I think I know the answer to it, is that throughout the permitting process, either the applicant or anyone who might be opposed to a permit has the ability to appeal or frankly file a lawsuit as well. So it gets even more complicated as you go through the process.
Zoning's a double-edged sword.
So I have a question for the engineer office, if we're on to that.
Yeah, why don't we wait? I want to see if Jeff or Chuck have any specific comments that they would like to make.
I'll say that we have briefly looked over the rules. We haven't looked through them in detail, but at this time, we have no comments.
Okay. Okay.
Tony, this is Alvin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
In listening to the comments, there was one comment in particular that stood out to me in terms of specific suggestions that were made. And I believe it was either the first or second speaker who made a comment about adjusting the language in the definition of enlargement. And that caught my eye. And so I don't know if you have the ability to flip to the definition as it exists in the document, but in the last sentence, in the last line, I should say, where it talks about horizontal or vertical increase in the size of the facility, I in thinking about it and thinking about the comment, I think there's some value to adding language, putting a comma after the word facility, and then adding or increase in the area of waste placement, adding those words. So that it would say horizontal or vertical increase in the size of the facility, comma, or increase in the area of waste placement beyond the limits approved.
Okay,
In the definition.
and so that's under section
Oh, I see, it's bottom of
3
page 40.
definitions, right? Okay, thank you. Chuck, give me any comments at this point, or, not sure you've had a chance to review it, like I said,
I don't have any technical comments. I have opinions, but I'm not here to share opinions.
Okay.
They're very restrictive. I mean, this would be difficult to cite any kind of facility, landfill, or even a transfer station, which, you know, transfer station's in a building, and really is very little impact to the surrounding, property. We have one that is, in Evendale, and is really, in the years that they've been in operation at this site, we've had, I think, maybe one complaint, and there's Class A business space within a quarter mile, or less, even actually several hundred feet. And it's, you know, it's just restrictive for one industry, to have this type of siting criteria. I don't know that an asphalt plant has the same kind of hoops it would have to go through to be cited. It'd be difficult to cite new facilities, I think, with this set of rules. The OEPA rules allow for facilities. This set of rules seems to restrict facilities.
Thank you, Chuck.
Sure.
I had a question for Jeff,
Okay.
sanitary engineer, right?
No,
Go ahead.
we do, with the Hamilton County Engineer's Office, we do roads and bridges.
Okay.
Okay.
It might not relate. Who would represent the sanitary engineer's office then?
That'd be, well,
I'm thinking support staff.
yeah, no, I know what you're, yeah. I don't know that there is actually a sanitary engineer for the county, because we don't
Yeah.
have one, because there's the Metropolitan Sewer District.
Yeah, that's right,
So,
that's right.
I'm sorry. Carrie, you've had your chance. Would you please let us discuss this?
With that,
You had your public input. I've asked you repeatedly, what does this mean? I'm not sure.
with that, maybe under Chuck's authority, maybe?
I don't believe it.
No, I don't think
No,
under the health
okay,
department.
okay.
So I think it goes back to Metropolitan Sewer District.
Okay.
On it. So again, I'm not sure how, since those rules came from Warren County, they may have, I think there's two things here. They may have a separate sanitary engineer's office. Claremont County, I think, actually has someone out there who's titled sanitary engineer.
That's what I'm familiar with, is Claremont County,
Yeah,
but.
they actually have that.
Yeah,
And I think the other thing is that probably the title of sanitary engineer probably came out of the Ohio regulations.
mhm.
So that, and again, that was back in 1989, I think it was more common at that time for every county to have a county sanitary engineer.
And we've morphed since then, yeah.
Yeah, different structure, basically, yes. because even in the original solid waste management planning process, sanitary engineers were cited in the Ohio Revised Code to have a role on it.
The reason why I ask is there's two sections that refer to
Can we
the.
please hold off just a minute, Bob?
Okay,
So
I can hold.
it won't take,
I can
Chuck,
hold.
thank you. So the advisors on the subcommittee, I wanted to know whether they had any comments, and, Sharon, I think I'll start with you, if you would.
Yes, as a representative of Whitewater Township and my business, Green Acres Kayak Rental, I don't want to repeat what everybody has already been repeating, but I personally feel we do need to adopt some type of rules. Instead of having the Ohio EPA, the state, be in charge of Hamilton County, I feel Hamilton County should have a voice. Instead of just by the state, we need to adopt some type of rules that we can modify as time goes. But we have to do something. We can't just have the state run us and not the county. Have some involvement.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Michelle, you had, were you gonna make a comment with it?
My question was just about the sanitary
Okay,
engineer.
okay.
No, I will add to, with the questions about the sanitary engineer, one of the things that should be considered is funding. So, the proposed rules, kind of break out several different sections, permitting. Permitting, we would have to look at who is going to review that. Currently, we don't have in-house staff. We would have to look out as, would we hire a consultant? Would we have to hire additional staff? Same with the compliance report. And then the third section I have, concerns with, regarding, monitoring. There's a whole section in there, regarding monitoring, and that would require a whole plan and additional staffing as well, how we would do that. So, I mean, the three of you are on the policy committee, you know that we run a pretty tight budget.
Yep.
We have lots of programs we're looking to expand, and this would be a substantial change in the budget.
I had that thought also, Brad, on it. I think that it will be, you just can't pass rules, you're gonna have to have a structure in place, staffing, administration, to handle those rules. And beyond, as you said, just the initial application, there's the ongoing requirements as well. So,
How does monitoring of new rules differ from, like, how the health department monitors now? How do you see that? What are the differences between our current monitoring?
Chuck, did you have a chance to look through the monitoring section? I know there were some specific things that maybe your office already does not do.
What section is that? Where these are responsibilities of the sanitary engineer, or?
Well, that's part of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, would it fall under the sanitary engineer? No, we'd have to work all those details out. I think there's a lot of information there that, who would be the responsible party doing this?
yeah, I don't wanna get into the details of this. It is an issue, and it's not been discussed about how that would even be done.
In relation to this conversation, there's several sections I recommend deleting before we approve the rules. And that impacts the cost. Yeah. I have several sections.
Okay.
So when we get to that point.
Okay, yeah, hold that thought, Bob, appreciate that. Thank you, Chuck. Kirsten, you have any comments? I'm sorry, Chuck, did you have anything else?
No, I mean, if you're referencing the compliance report, I mean, that looks like that's the board's purview.
Yeah, yes, it's the Board of County
There's an improvement plan that would have to be, completed and reviewed. I don't know that that would be a health district responsibility under,
Okay.
yeah.
It's gonna be somebody's responsibility, is the
Right,
point I
yeah.
think Brad is making,
We'll
yeah.
probably, the solid waste district would be the one that would have to, do funding.
It would seem that the Board of County Commissioners would likely come back and say, solid waste district, we would like you to take this on.
Yeah, there's a lot of discretion that's gonna be necessary in that review.
Yeah.
You know, what is a mitigation for an issue that's raised, and is it adequate? Those are all kind of subjective, review. Very, very difficult to do a review like that.
Okay, yeah, I understand.
I would agree.
Kirsten, do you have any comments at this point? I know this is,
No.
it's all sort of new to you, is probably an understatement, but.
No, it's not new. There's no issues with diversity, equity, or inclusion here, or in anything really that's been brought up, so, yeah, I'm just here.
Okay, well, do appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure you have a lot of other things on your plate to handle as well. So, all right, and Michelle, you didn't have anything else on it? Okay, well, Bob, why don't you go ahead? You had some comments and some other items you wanted to discuss on this.
I do, but, do we wish to go, proceed with the red line version or the?
I think the final version.
That works for me.
Yeah.
And by going with the final, we are accepting the attorney's, corrections. And I accept that. I accept that, Pat.
Okay, I'll say it this way. There were some things that were corrections and some things that were recommendations.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good understanding. And I accept that, Pat.
I don't entirely.
Okay, as we go through it.
Sure.
Raise some objections as we go
As
through.
long as you hit the sections that you had.
Okay, using the, final draft, not the red line draft, our attorney recommended, but did not, fully delete, but recommended some deletions of some unnecessary sections. And I'd like to look at those sections and I will.
A lot of people would like a copy of this. Everybody in the audience is talking about, can we please see this? Could we take?
You can make a request for it and we'll consider it, yes.
Yeah.
So when it becomes public record, you will have access to it.
Could we have 5-minute breaks and get copies for the entire audience? That attorney doesn't have one?
We don't even have, we haven't even come to that point yet, Carrie.
No, I'm just
Or
wondering.
whatever you want to be called,
When does it
Caroline.
become public record?
I would, Chief Long, I would defer to you.
I'm deferring to outside counsel, his comments.
Alvin, would you have any, comments on that?
Comments on what? The issue of, I mean, what's happened here is that I was asked to take a review of the draft rules as they existed at the last subcommittee meeting, which I've done, and I went through and conducted that review and analysis and submitted some information back to the committee as part and parcel of my advice and counseling. It's all privileged, and so that's what's been provided to you in order to help shape the discussion as to where you may want to go with this. So, so what we have right now, I think, unless somebody's done something different, is a working document from me that's part of my legal advice.
So the question is, when does it become a public document? When we make a recommendation?
Well, right now, what you have is a document that, right, all of the documents reflecting your public work, I mean, your work on issues for the subcommittee are public documents, but they might be subject to an exception. And that's what this is. What you have that has come from me is going to be subject to an exception because it's confidential and privileged communication from me.
Right.
So I think until you have gone through and used and done what you need to do in order to understand that document and work through it, and then come up with whatever it is that you want to, whatever you want to go with. I think that document will, that comes from the subcommittee will be a public document at that point in time. And so let me just emphasize here, okay, what this process is. Because I don't think people should get, well, this is an unusual process in that a subcommittee has been appointed to make a recommendation to a body that's going to make a recommendation to the entity that actually has the authority to adopt a rule. So we are fairly well down in the chain of the process at the early stages of the process for doing this. And so when I think about a recommendation to make a recommendation, I think people have some anxiety that maybe there won't be an opportunity to make any additional adjustments to this after this morning, whatever happens, whatever the decision of the subcommittee is. I think that's wrong. I think that this is still a working document even after this morning, and the policy committee will have to deal with it, and some adjustments can be made at that stage as well. So what we're trying to do right now is, you've asked for my input to help you get to a point where you actually have a reasonable, decent document for purposes of further discussion and consideration. That's what we're doing.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Alvin.
Thank you. I'd like to proceed with the goal, no promises, but the goal that we'll have a finished document by the end of today's meeting.
Well, I think that was the direction that the policy committee
Exactly.
provided to us.
Yeah, following that direction. So proceeding, Alvin, our attorney, recommended deletion of several sections. I'd like to walk through that. I would like to take his recommendation on several of them, but keep two of them. And I have some logic behind that.
Which sections are those?
Okay, section 6 on page 10 is in reference to
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me find it here.
Yeah, page 10, bottom of page 10, section 6.
I don't know if my numbering coincides with yours.
Yeah, I don't.
Section 6.
Does it work as page 10 for everybody?
Let me pull that up, both copies.
Supervision of construction, enlargement, alteration, and modification.
That's it.
Yeah.
Supervision of construction, enlargement, alteration, or modification costs.
Yeah, it's page 10. If you've got, November
I've got it.
30th draft at the
I
top.
got it, go ahead. You're looking at November 30th, right?
Yes.
Okay.
November 30th, yes, November 30th draft.
Okay.
It's in reference to the county sanitary engineer. And
I kind of assumed that was Chuck, but.
I'm thinking of deletion. I'm agreeing with Elvin and deletion of that particular, short section,
You're talking all paragraph A?
A and B,
Okay, so this section altogether?
that entire section there. Duplication.
Let me think about that for a minute, Bob.
Yeah, no, let me get through all the recommendations and then you.
Okay, we can go back, if you want to do it that way, that's fine.
We can make a decision collectively or individually.
Okay.
The following page, section 8, rights of access for the sanitary engineer. Whoever is playing that role already has access. I think that's duplication, so I'm recommending deletion of that one as well too. That full section. There's already county access for all these facilities. And section 9, logs to policy committee, daily logs. Access is already there, as needed. So deletion of that one as well. So I'm seeing a duplication of what is already available. 10 and 11, sections 10 and 11 on that same page, our attorney recommended deletion, but I'm recommending keeping those. I find those to be useful in potential situations in the future, and I'm recommending that we keep those. And then section 12, deletion, submission of inventory information on the first day of April of each year.
I'm sorry, back up, Bob.
Okay.
You're recommending keeping 10. I didn't know it was deleted.
Yeah, that is, information that, does not fall into, let me read that. In addition to the other requirements of these rules, any person who obtains from Ohio EPA a permission to install solid waste transfer, disposal, recycling, or resource in the district shall provide to the policy committee a copy of all plans, specifications, and other materials submitted to Ohio EPA, where such materials were submitted as part of the permit to install application process are required to be submitted to the Ohio EPA pursuant to the permit to install.
Okay, and that's in this,
That's what
that's in this present version,
yes,
okay?
yes.
And you're just saying keep it,
Just keep it.
Okay.
Not delete it.
okay?
I see that as just completion of the process. And 11 is notice of intent to close a facility. I find a 180-day notice. I find that to be important information for the policy committee in financial planning.
So you're saying you want to keep that?
Yes. And then number 12 was recommended deletion, submission of inventory information. And I consulted with Michelle, and she does not need that for the district records, so that would be unnecessary. So I found his recommendations very useful, but to keep 2 out of the recommendations that he recommended deletion, and delete all the others. So I do like the rules as submitted and altered by the attorney with those exceptions, those 2 exceptions, and the deletion of those sections. I also I do like the attorney's recommendation for the enlargement. I didn't capture the exact language. I was hoping Susan caught that. That was stated about a half an hour ago from
I can give it to you again, Bob.
Okay.
yeah.
If you go to the
That's the bottom of
definition, if you can go to the definition of enlargement in the definitions.
Yes. And where does that get inserted?
Pardon me? Yes, right. In the next to the last line of the definition, it says a horizontal or vertical increase in the size of the facility. That's existing language, Bob.
Yes.
Put a comma after that, facility,
Got it.
and insert these words or increase in the area of waste placement. And then the rest of the language continues as existing.
Got it. I do like that addition. And in reviewing the language that Tim Mara from Oxbow submitted,
Page 7, item 2.
The half mile, I'd like our attorney thoughts there. When I read through this, I had a great deal of discomfort with the half mile, and Tim is recommending 5 miles because the preserve and other water impacts are within 5 miles. Thoughts from our attorney on that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that, in Alvin's defense, he isn't. We were just delivered this, less than an hour ago. I'm not gonna ask Alvin to opine on something that he hasn't had really time to consider. And then the other question is, how might that impact other sections of the rules or the proposed rules that are here?
Yeah, I think you captured it, Tony. I mean, my thought was the comments were interesting and they should be evaluated. And, and I think there's time after today to review whether any revision is appropriate based on the comment, and what it should be specifically, and how it might interrelate with some other provisions. And that can be done after today. And if the determination, if I look at that and I say, here's how I might make such an adjustment if one is warranted, and we can submit that to the policy committee as part of its consideration of whatever recommendation comes out of this committee.
I do like that. I do not want to discard entirely his comments. I like all three of his comments, but I do think there's time for us to evaluate that, perhaps at the discussion with the policy committee.
So can we, just put the range in for today?
Well, at the moment, it states a half a mile.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you wanna keep it at a half a mile for today, or you wanna put a range in for today?
Why don't we do this? You can just put a blank in there. You're gonna throw it to the policy committee anyway. And just put a blank in when the policy committee meets. The background can be given on that.
I like that suggestion. I do, because then we're not settled on a particular distance, and there needs to be, and it forces a decision then. I do like that idea. And that is on page 7. Well, the previous report, page 7. Now we gotta find where that is. Yeah, we've had so many revisions, we'll have to find where that is, because it's not on our page 7.
Right. But if you could generally go down to where the criteria for the compliance report are contained.
Correct,
It
that's
was
where
under
it is.
sub G. G is in George.
Right. It's on page 9.
I see it now.
And on that, it's item F.
9.
It's F on page 9.
Oh, I'm sorry. F. Yes, Frank.
Yep.
So within 1 mile and consider larger area.
No, we're just gonna leave it blank.
At least be a half mile and then maybe make it bigger rather than go blank.
Well, you wanna, I'll get into a discussion about how wide that should be, but we're not gonna settle it here today.
Let's leave it blank and we'll discuss it at the policy committee.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, those are the changes that I'm recommending at this moment in time to the rules that I desire to recommend to the policy committee.
The other change was applicability, like, we were gonna remove compost, right?
Oh, this does remove compost.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and, I do want to throw out the question, I believe it deserves a discussion. At the policy committee, I was asked if my intent was to throw out compost out of these rules, and my answer was yes. My intent was to not include the composting facilities. And our attorney honored my request. Compost is not included, it's excluded, and it's more thoroughly excluded than my set of rules, because I think I missed one example. So it does not include compost facilities. I think we should have a discussion on that, because anaerobic digestion facilities and compost facilities of 5,000 square feet or larger can create a nuisance and a siting issue. So should it be included? And I can argue both sides of that issue. I can argue that it should not be included because we want to encourage in our district planning more elaborate and extensive composting. That I'm on the side that we need more food waste and composting activity, and we don't need an additional barrier. I can also be on the other side, that is that the public should have some standing in the citing and public hearings, particularly on large-scale composting and anaerobic digestion. And there may be an environmental and economic justice issues on the siting. So I think we need a conscious decision among the three of us. Do we include composting facilities of that nature in these rules or not?
Well, may I add something?
Yes.
Subcommittee members? So what just one thing I would like you to keep in mind, and this was part of my thinking in opting for a narrowed set of rules is, and I think Bill Rumpke in his comments helped shed a little bit of light on this. I noted in his comments, he discussed in excess of 30 recycling and waste composting facilities within the jurisdiction. And that's a significant number of regulated entities that you pick up and that you add to this if you opt to expand it rather than narrowing it as I have suggested. And when you're increasing the regulated community like that, I just think that that it's really important to think carefully about how this will be applied, what kind of resources it'll require the district to bring to bear in order to apply the rule with integrity. And so from that perspective, okay, and so that I balance that against the idea here or the fact that under Ohio Revised Code, rulemaking can be a fairly streamlined exercise. There's not a lot of process that's required under the Revised Code in order to do it. And the rules can be amended, modified, enlarged, narrowed, as time goes on, without a whole lot of difficulty. And so my only suggestion is, I don't think there's anything necessarily magical about today in terms of deciding whether the universe of regulated entities should be expanded to include compost facilities, digesters, and so on. You've got time to evaluate that a little bit more deliberatively going forward. And I guess I would suggest you take your time about your consideration of those issues. That's it.
Fairly good thought about
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
and I'm good kind of starting small and then knowing that if and when in the future that became something that needed to be done, it could be added. So I don't think it has to be that broad right now.
And I'd be curious about public input on that thought too.
Yeah.
I side more on encouraging food waste collection and composting, but I don't wish to create that public nuisance. That's my thought pattern there. Yeah.
I agree.
So, yeah, I pull back from the suggestion then of adding it to the rules then.
Okay.
So I yield back the table to either of you two on the rules. Sue?
I think, that what we got back, from the attorney was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm comfortable with it, what we have here.
Any changes? Nope.
No?
Yeah, I gave a lot of thought to this even before these draft rules were put forth, and I think I was pretty clear from the start that I didn't see any value in the district duplicating efforts that are already done by other agencies, if those, and we can't for Ohio EPA, and we probably can't override other rules or regulations by other agencies. I don't believe we have the authority to do that. A lot of what I see in these rules or regulations are already being addressed under Ohio EPA rules. We had Ohio EPA, they just, their presentations, which really didn't go into the details of how extensive that permitting process really is, other than the steps that it goes through. The second thing is that, we had MSD come in, and I guess I didn't realize how well that whole process, they gave the example of the leachate that's generated at the used roadside, how that's handled. So that gave me a much higher level of comfort than I had before. And then this gets into these other items like landscaping, lighting. Good points. But that puts the district in a position of doing, basically, we're supposed to now do zoning and land use. And so how can we even do that, I guess, is the first question. Second of all, I don't know that we can, although I'll leave that up to Alvin to go with that. And then third if these regulations had been in effect when the transfer station went in where's that, Sharonville, Evendale? I'm not sure how these would have worked with the city of Evendale. I think our city, or village, I can't remember which. And the same thing is going to happen every time you get into reviewing these. If you apply these regulations, how does that work with all the existing other regulations that are out there? In Evendale, if they came in and said, well, under our land use and zoning regulations, we're happy with a 100-foot buffer. Are we going to come in, is the district, let me back up, are the county commissioners going to come in and say, well, we think it should be 200 feet? And I'm trying to think about this down the road in terms of how this will actually work. And that's just an example on it. And I've said this from the start, that you rush through these things, there is, for some reason, there's an emergency basis to get these things passed. And I still haven't really seen that. I've heard all the comments from both sides of this issue, but I don't see that there's such an emergency that we need to do this. That said, we've been given our direction by the policy committee. They want to see something back, a recommendation back, I guess, ASAP. And I'm not sure I see it. Let me back up. So any proof that the existing Ohio EPA regulations work, and I think there's a lot out there. And locally, I'll say that Sue, in the city of Cincinnati, the Elder landfill was not successful in getting expansion. That was back in 1995. And the regulations haven't gotten any less stringent. Matter of fact, they've gotten more stringent. And in terms of, you say, well, let's throw composting out because you don't want to create an undue burden on it. Well, we don't want to create an undue burden on anybody. But one of the worst problems that we had with composting was right on SD Avenue, Center Hill years ago. And it wasn't an issue of lack of regulations, it was an issue of enforcement of regulations. So that's, I think the issues here are enforcement. That's what I see. Piling on duplicate regulations, I just don't see how that's going to have an impact. You may have some points about, Bob, about wanting additional public input. I'll tell you what I've seen in other parts of the state is that, going through the Ohio EPA process where they're into a public hearing or even a public information meeting, and people are coming out and, you know, they're going for 2 hours and they will suspend the meeting and say, we're suspending the meeting, we're gonna continue it at a later date. My observations have been that Ohio EPA has been very good about allowing public input, to the extent of one technique they use is, we're not gonna close this public hearing out today. We will, you know, hold they have a legal term where they can do that, I can't remember what it is, where they're gonna say, we're gonna suspend this for now, and then we will reconvene, but the reconvening is in a week or two or something like that, because they want more public input on it. We mentioned the appeal process is there for either side of any, or 2 sides or 4 sides on these issues, to always weigh in on an appeal process or through lawsuits. I'm just very concerned that we're going to push this up to the county commissioners ultimately, who's going to have to deal with this. We aren't, and I think it will be very difficult to effectively administrate, and that puts aside the cost issues on this. And I don't want to get into cost issues, but that needs to be a consideration as well. And we're not going to have time to, with the deadline we've been given. You know, Bob, in terms of your specific items on the right of access for the sanitary engineer, I don't have any strong feeling on that. Taking that out, logs to the policy committee, I think that's a duplicate of information that's already available. Submission of Ohio EPA materials, I'm kind of, okay, fine. I mean, if you want all that material, I guess I'm wondering what we're going to do with it, but it's publicly available. All you have to do is call up Ohio EPA, and some of it's actually posted on their website already. And notice of intent to close, I believe there's already a requirement. I can't recall what the details on that are, but I believe there's a requirement that you have to give notice to Ohio EPA when closure is anticipated on it, which was 9. Submission of inventory information, I never really understood that. Anyway, so I'd be happy to delete that. But again, that general kind of information is the facilities have to make quarterly, annual, semi-annual reports. There's a lot of reporting that goes on that gets fed back into Ohio EPA on it. So that's sort of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, quick response.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just, and I do appreciate your comments, Tony, I do. The items on page 9 on the compliance report are primarily items that Ohio EPA cannot rule on. So if this is of value different than the Ohio EPA public input process, because most of those items are items that EPA cannot provide. I mean, they'll take public input on it, but they cannot rule on those items. So this adds value to the process. I've testified before Ohio EPA. They're very courteous. They take all kinds of input. They are very good in their public processes. The concern is that they have limitations on what they can act upon. And so this process has 2 important processes. One, that the county commissioners are the listening ears, and that's a different point there. And they have responsibilities, they're elected officials locally to the citizens. And second point is they can act on different criteria than the Ohio EPA can act on. And I think those are 2 important points based on these rules. Can these rules be improved upon? Well, yeah, we can discuss that along the process between here and the policy committee, and between the policy committee and the commissioners. I'm open to improvements, and that's a public process. But I do feel these rules are necessary and not duplicative of the EPA process.
Now, I could kick off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are just the ones on page 9 that I see are duplicate of what's already required by Ohio EPA. And the rest of these, a lot of these would be required if there were, under zoning. Well, you know, what's not, is, you know, so traffic impacts are typically a zoning issue.
But
Noise is not, typically an issue, as I recall, on zoning, but it's been a while. Consumption of potable water supply, I'm not sure what that has, I don't see what the, I don't understand that, why that's even in there. And it would be handled under zoning and building code requirements anyway. Why the district would be concerned about consumption of electrical energy? I'm not understanding why the district would be concerned about that.
climate change.
Well, that doesn't necessarily directly translate into climate change issues.
I think,
And that's climate change, I'm not sure is within the purview of the district.
there's a significant part of the county that's not under zoning. So as you mentioned, zoning issues, the protection of zoning issues is important.
Well, I think there's an option available, and that's whatever those 2 areas were, 3 areas, I can't remember which, that they could adopt their own zoning or have the county administer it for them.
I do understand your position, but I do disagree. Yeah. We are charged with bringing rules forward. I do believe this is a good rules package. I'm ready to move this package forward.
Can I add one thing, subcommittee members? I mean, I think part of the struggle here is trying to review this document and what kind of hypothetically apply it in the abstract is really difficult. And I think so there's 2 things going on. One thing is a big thrust of the rule is to make sure that you get that the reviewing body, and the way it would work in practice is that the policy committee almost certainly would hire technical consultants, environmental consultants who know this area, whether it's transfer station or sanitary landfill, but know the area very, very well in terms of what's required, how it functions, what it's supposed to do, and so on, to help it analyze the materials and then direct the committee's attention to areas of likely or potential concern. That's normally how implementation of this process works. You've got some other assistants that help, you've got your lawyers and so on, but really environmental consultant becomes very central to the whole exercise, and that's normal. But so part of the rule is designed to make sure you get enough information to help analyze whatever project is put forward. But the other part then is to say, okay, so we have some stuff in the document that it may look like it covers territory that gets into what EPA does, but this is where I made a conscious effort to clearly revise the document to exclude those aspects that would duplicate or overlap or contradict the issues that are reviewed and considered and addressed by Ohio EPA, because that is that's the area where we don't want to be. So you see that in the criteria, you see that with respect to elimination of some of the compliance report issues. You see it in clarification that it is the intent of the rules is to avoid those areas and to not get into them. And so I just ask you to keep that in mind. And I want folks to understand that looking at the language in the abstract, it raises potentially some issues, but you have to balance making sure that you get all of the appropriate information, everything that you need so you can understand the project. And then I have some language in here that I've recommended to narrow and make sure that the policy committee and the board, when they actually consider a project, are staying within the area where they're supposed to, where their review is supposed to be confined.
Well, with that thought, I move that with the corrections we've made in this meeting, I recommend this revised document, for policy committee action.
And, yeah, with the understanding that there are gonna be some refinements moving forward and future input is still being sought.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Bob, can I just walk through something with you real quick? So, section 6.
Section 6, yeah.
Delete it.
We recommended deleting that section.
Section 8. Is that it?
Section 8.
Rights of access.
Deletion of that section.
Section 9 was a deletion.
Deletion.
Section 10, you wanted to keep.
Keep. 11, keep. 12, delete.
Delete. Okay, that's what I got in my notes.
Yep. And additional language under the definition of enlargement.
Yeah, I got that too. That's in the definition section.
And can we rely on our attorney to just finalize the document and send that back to us? Is that appropriate?
That's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Also, just note, but I certain that everyone has this in mind, but under, excuse me, C2F of the compliance report, half mile is gonna be changed to a blank, right? Isn't that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me, yes.
Okay.
And I asked that, and I asked for the committee's consideration that this become a public document as we move this to the policy committee.
So hopefully we would be able to get it out so people can read it before the Monday meeting.
For those that request a copy.
I think the appropriate procedure on this would be for us to at least, let's get it to the policy committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Yeah,
Before, you know, they've charged us with giving them a deliverable.
Right.
And I think they need to have a copy of it and then they can decide at that point what they're gonna do with it, if anything. They might make major changes, they might just say, this is good, we're gonna go with it, and at that point, or they might say, we wanna have additional public input on it.
Well, as it's distributed to the policy committee and there's an announcement of a policy committee, generally those documents are public documents.
But this is, Alvin, this would be still under attorney-client privilege at this point?
I mean, I think that the document that has been the subject of an approval recommendation by this subcommittee, that once I put those adjustments on it, that assuming that this is accepted, that it's approved by the vote that you may be about to have, I think that document is a public document.
Okay. All right. Thanks, that's helpful. I would. So it becomes a public document at the point where it is submitted to the policy committee.
Yeah, I think for sure the final document that is the subject of your recommendation, that's a public document.
Right, and we really don't have that final document. We'll have that final document after Alvin makes his do it. So I guess it'll be, I would like to do it so there's I'd like the release come through the policy committee, I guess is my point. I think, given that understand what I'm saying, Bob?
Have an attachment to.
Yeah, at that point, it will be a public doc, I think that's what Albert was saying, that there's, I see it kind of a gray area, so exactly what date and hour and time, but I don't, I don't want to have Greg Kesterman sitting there, and he gets a call, and he's like, what document? I just don't think that's appropriate to do that. I think, on the other hand, there's gonna be plenty of time. The policy committee and the Board of County Commissioners, they can have as much additional public input as they think is necessary.
Tony, can I make a suggestion?
So anyway, no, I'm sorry. We're trying to get this done. We already are over 15 minutes. I know it's important. We all have things to do. I think we have a motion and a second, and it's up for a vote. So.
Any other discussion?
No other
Okay.
discussion.
Okay,
Discussion's closed.
so all those,
So I'll call the vote. Sue? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bob, yes. I'm a no.
yes.
No, it's a no. So could you, Michelle, I'll leave it up, we'll wait to get Alvin's revised copy. I don't know that, we'd like to get a revised copy, obviously, but as soon as that comes in, I think it can be worked into the agenda for the policy committee meeting,
We're still trying to set.
which I have to talk to you about.
Yeah.
I have to talk to Michelle about. Okay. And I think,
Just for clarity,
Yeah.
so the decision was that we're gonna keep this under wraps until after the meeting on Monday, or after the next policy meeting, or it is?
no, my understanding is that it'll become a public document as soon as it is sent to the policy committee.
Okay,
Send out the agenda.
when you send out the agenda, okay, gotcha, okay.
All right, I think that is, I have anything else on the agenda? I think that's it. We talked about item 9 in terms of stakeholder input, and then we covered, item 8 and item 9. We just covered both of those, so thank you all. Thank you for all the comments, appreciate that. If you have comments that you made and you want to submit them in writing, please do so. I would encourage you to do that sooner rather than later, because then they can feed up to the policy committee quicker, but there's still plenty of time. Thank you all. Yep, very good, good point. Yes, we're adjourned.